Get ready to strap in for another exciting episode of No Driving Gloves, where Derek, John, and Will use over 75 years combined industry knowledge to bring you a bare-knuckled review on the collector car hobby. Let's get rolling. Welcome back, everybody. I'm glad to hear you, or see you, listen to you, joining us again this week. You've got John, Will, and Derek here to chat about cars and such. We're going to go ahead and kind of tell you about, again, what we did during the week, so you have a little bit of idea what goes on behind the scenes. As I said in the last episode, I had a makers event to go do this weekend. It was more of the artist type stuff, but met some pretty cool jewelers and metal workers, metal artists. There was some, pig iron pourers and that at the event. Picked up a few new podcast listeners, had a few people comment on the podcast, so I know a few of you were out there and enjoying the event too. Otherwise, I'm just working on the big swap meet that I have to manage in October for the day job thing. Either one of you do anything exciting or interesting this week? I do know that I think Will and Derek met for the first time in person.
Yeah, Will and Derek met. We don't really like each other, so we're gonna, we'll see how long this podcast lasts, Right, Will?
Sure.
Applications being accepted.
I did buy dinner, so I must like you a little bit.
Well, they say I'm not a cheap date, so no. My week's just been pretty much. I've been working the exhibit coming up that we're opening up at work. I actually worked over the weekend, so till that exhibit's open, my life's going to be work.
Obviously, I was in Bowling Green. Met Derek for the first time. We attended the Tri-5 Nationals, which is put on by Dan Chuck and Woody's Hot Rod Shop. It was a very, very, very well-organized event. 2,718 Tri-5s, I think, was what was there. That includes Corvettes, Tri-5 cars, and Tri-5 trucks. So it was, it was a lot of Tri-5s, but, drag racing going on, a lot of vendors. We actually participated in vending. So we had our trailer set up and brought 3 vehicles, and one of them which received top 25. So that was pretty neat. Something else I can add to our achievements here at Big Oak Garage. So also meeting Derek for the first time and attending the museum he is curator at was very interesting.
Private tour. Don't forget private.
I did private tour. Got to go around into some places and people staring at us like we were part of the museum.
You guys do look like relics in person.
Yeah, we did stand by there and model during one point. There was about 30 people that crowded around, and we just stood there, like don't move because we're part of the exhibit. It was pretty neat. Not really. And then busted back to Alabama and got back to work.
That summarizes our exciting lives. It's kind of just like everybody else. There's work and there's a little bit of fun. So I think we talked about how the internet has influenced the collector car hobby, and that's where we're going to go a little bit tonight in the discussion. The goods, the bads, the evils. I want to say I started to get into cars really for a paycheck back when I was at Illinois Central College earning a modern automotive technology degree. In that class, this was mid-90s, so the internet was new. It was so new, the school really didn't have computers. It wasn't computers at every desk. Nobody carried, smartphones didn't exist. I carried this massive Motorola flip phone, a DPC 550. It was a new thing when we went to get our books and manuals to learn how to figure out the procedure to work on whatever car. It was a Mitchell manual. It was a hardback book you would check out from the parts counter and go through. I do remember we had to do an assignment, and we had to research it on the newfangled internet. At the time, I don't even think I had a computer at home. I did use a web TV unit, which was this little box that sat on your TV, and I bought the deluxe one with a keyboard. so that you could type and remember doing. You couldn't even print off of it. That was the biggest thing with web TV. You couldn't print off of it, and it drove people crazy. That's how far back I've been in the car industry, and I've grown with the car industry with the internet. Back with discussion forums, well before social media, well before the chat rooms. Remember being on the CRX forum all the time, checking it every night, and it's really a layout I miss back in the HTML GeoCities days. That's where I started with the car hobby, and that's, like I said, I've been around me every day that I've been in cars, and at present, my job, much to my supervisor's disgust, I think I probably spend 30 hours minimum a week on the computer searching for parts, doing research, and then again communicating with people on email, and that really a revolutionary thing. Where's your first exposure to, I want to say, internet in the car hobby?
Mine was kind of similar to yours, John. Growing up with old cars, restoring cars with my father, we acquire cars, to restore. Yeah, I remember. I'm not much of a tech guy, modern tech especially. Give me 100-year-old car, we're doing good. I do remember the very first computer I think we had was a Commodore PC-10. We're getting into being a tech podcast now. Weird. And then we had varying computers going up. But I remember when we first got internet and we were able to go online, good old dial-up. It was really, for me, the internet and the classic car hobby, other than classic car hobby of what I'd been doing with restoring cars in the garage with Dad, was now going online and researching the history of the cars, whatever I could find, if there were parts out there available, things like that, and just trying to track down whatever you could that wasn't in your local area, your immediate area, which became convenient. Unfortunately, some of the cars that, of course, Dad and I own are oddball cars, and in the early days of the internet, you couldn't find anything on them because, of course, they weren't a Model T and there weren't 100,000, 200,000 of them still in existence. That's kind of where my experiences with it began. And, of course, like you, John, today, as a curator, and even in my work in conservation, there's a lot of time spent on the computer doing some research on cars and artifacts that are car related, and just, delving into that world of everything that's out on the internet, and then, of course, trying to figure out what's actually accurate and not accurate. But I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little bit.
My first experience really with the internet and cars was when I was in high school, 16, 17 years old, 18 years old. And my father and I drag raced. So it was getting on the internet and, seeing who won the national event that week, or checking out the points for the NHRA bracket race programs and stuff like that. So that's really where I got my start, looking up info on the internet. So that's 97, 98 was when that was going on. And then when I went to college, which was for, automobile restoration, there was a lot of research that was involved on certain projects, and we researched everything on the internet. And if you couldn't find it, then you tried to find a book or something like that. But pretty much you could find whatever you needed to find on the internet. And that was 2000, 2001. Today, I hardly pick up the phone to order any part. It's all done via the internet, whether it's through Holley or Summit or JEGS or MotorState or any of the vendors that we use.
Any of which would be welcomed as a sponsor.
Daggone right. And so all of them, we pretty much just order on the internet, unless it's a custom part that needs to be custom designed or something like that. It's strictly find it on the internet and get it on the way.
Say that's kind of where it's grown for me too. Is I order all the parts for our restoration department, and I much prefer to do everything on the internet. It gives you a time track. I believe in paper trails. I've learned over my career paper trails are very good. You can hang yourself with them. But if you actually do your job, you can save yourself a lot of times by proving when it was ordered, what you ordered, if the wrong thing was shipped, things like that. I even to the point, it's I think we all kind of do it definitely with our cell phones. If we don't know the number or whatever, we let it go to voicemail. But I let every phone call that hits my desk go to voicemail because it gets emailed to me, and then I have a record of receiving that phone call, and it's there to access. And organizing these swap meets and that, you deal with a lot of people that, oh no, I talked to you on such and such a day, and I called, and sorry, I have 18,000 emails or something, and you're not there. So I don't delete them. When it comes down to just daily life today, as far as email and ordering on the internet, really provides a paper trail and saves a lot of confusion. Even when you call, even when I have to call and talk to somebody about ordering parts, it's just kind of uncomfortable because you hope that they understood what you needed or what oddball thing. We're all working with cars that aren't everyday things. So sometimes it's a description of what I need, or it's just like this car, but I need to make sure this part fits. And Will's creating everything from a blank piece of paper. So I'm sure he faces some of those challenges. And no, I wanted this specific model year and you sent me this, and little things like that really add up.
The good thing about the way we do it is we'll just order something that's close to what we want, and then we'll just cut it up and make it fit or change it to where it's to our liking or something like that. So I can still get away with ordering that part and then just, modify it to fit our needs.
And I remember back in college, and I was in college with Will, it was 98 through 2000 actually, and at the time I didn't live on campus. I had a computer and I remember hours every night being on eBay, and this was in the infancy of eBay, where I could go in and I could search for Lotus and buy Lotus memorabilia, and I could look at everything listed that day, every day, everything that was new, that was Lotus, that had appeared. And there were only eBay would come up and its opening screen would be 2.1 million items for sale in all of eBay. Now I get on eBay and there's 2.1 million items in Lotus for sale. And it wasn't new parts. It was good classic stuff. I'll be honest, I very rarely get on eBay today, 20 years later, because so much of it is Chinese stuff, fakes, counterfeits. Everybody wants to use keywords. And, if I want to look for Lotus medallions or Lotus emblems or Lotus decals, I want the real thing. I don't want to have to sift through everybody that's got a Cricut and a silhouette printer at home, cutting their own vinyl and trying to sell it to me as something real, because typefaces and fonts and just the thickness of some of the letters. I had to reorder a set of decals this week that a couple $100 to go on a race car, because the T had slightly the wrong angle on the top of the T from the original set that I bought to the ones that actually were on this car when it raced. That's one of the bad things about the internet, and I'll definitely say eBay is the number of counterfeit things and the quality of the parts, and the descriptions aren't always accurate, and you're curious if you're getting something.
Yeah, I think that's a good point in all of this, which is the internet has increased that kind of traffic, reproduction parts or knockoffs, this stuff like this. And it's also a tip to not only the internet, but the advancement of technology even around the internet, with people being able to search the internet, find historic photos, and then be able to, or buy original decals, do a bad scan of them, low resolution, something like that, try to make reproductions and try to make money, it's kind of one of those, it's a good thing and it's a bad thing, because even on the historical end of things, when as a curator and as a historian, when you're trying to do research, trying to separate out the scholarly articles from some guy that owns car and it's his favorite car in the world, and he's going to write the history on that car, and he's just going to write what he comes up with. It's good and bad, because the internet allows an outlet for people to do these things, and sometimes it is really bad for the hobby and for the restorers if they're not careful and really paying attention to what they're looking at, if they're buying parts or if they're buying decals, like you said, John. And for historians, we have to be very cautious. One of the things all of us historians hate is Wikipedia. Nobody likes that. It's led to an interesting time where we're not going out and going to, at least not as much as people used to, going out to swap meets and finding the original parts or the, OEM replacement parts at a swap meet or any of that. We're going online and we're trying to trust people to be honest. And I think that's a big issue with the internet, is there's too many people that can be dishonest.
Going to totally discount the internet as the internet was invented and fraud and misinformation happened. I've been exposed to restorations, and you get a car and you get a box of records with it. The car's from the 50s or the 40s or whatever generation, and this car's been restored once, or it's been campaigned in a vintage race, or you see some of the misinformation that is out there where they were trying to falsify records to try to increase the pedigree of the car. So it didn't happen with the internet. So I'm not going to totally blame the internet. It happened before then, back when, you had written communications and things like that. It has also helped with a little bit of honesty, because even like this podcast, we're very careful with what we say, because we want to be right with it, and we know we're going to get called if it's wrong. People listen to us and take us for what we say. There's a certain responsibility of the information you put out there, and one of the reasons I assembled this team for the podcast, Will, Derek, and myself, is I think we're all three very honest. And while podcasting is part of the internet and the advent of the internet, we want to make sure our information is correct, and we're not going to stray too much out of what we actually know. Even the fantasy episode on spending $250,000, we spent a couple minutes in that episode on air verifying car prices. I did not believe Will could buy a truck that cheap. Even though Will buys trucks that cheap, I didn't believe it could be done, and I proved that was an episode I've proved myself wrong twice. So twice in 1 hour, that's pretty tough. So, but the internet has just made it much easier to disseminate incorrect information, and that's a drawback.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think I wasn't trying to say the internet's at fault, but it has made it a much easier and a much wider range of that to occur. It's globally accessible now. Like you say, it's always existed. It's just, it has, I think, increased the possibilities and chances of it.
Well, as you said, anybody can pop up on Wikipedia and go to, say, the McLaren F1 page and make up whatever the most expensive one sold for. And if they did it, say, if they hit that Saturday morning, an uninformed buyer is going to, get on there and go, oh, wow, the record price for a McLaren F1 is $23 million. Well, it's really, I think, 12.8, 13.7, something like that, low teens. And there's, a very significant McLaren being auctioned that afternoon. And that little bit of information could translate out to somebody who's live broadcasting. If we were broadcasting, if we were watching the auctions online and we were broadcasting it, and we quickly got on the Wikipedia page, and all of a sudden that wrong information's now been repeated by us because we didn't know any better. That's, like you said, the Wikipedia provides some great information, and I dig up some pretty good information on Wikipedia. I always want to confirm the information that I get. You know, it gives me an idea, and I need to see anything, especially in a museum setting. If I'm presenting this to the general public, I need to see it at least twice, if not 3 times, from 3 different unrelated sources. And it's the old journalism rule that doesn't exist, but I need a source, and I need 2 confirmations on that source before I really want to tell anybody that information and portray it as fact.
And if you can get a primary source of the information is key. And then, but I want to go back because you said something that I think can lead to an interesting discussion between the 3 of us, which is you mentioned someone getting on Wikipedia the morning of, say, an auction and putting a false all-time record high price on there. And if that spreads fast enough, is there a chance with the internet and things like that happening that now the price of the car being sold at auction that day is going to go higher because there's misinformation out there? Can the internet, I have to say, I don't know of any record of this ever happening yet, but is there a chance in the future that misinformation being spread on the internet could affect the sale price of a significant vehicle and make it go higher than it technically should?
I'm sure that it could, because I mean, you watch the Barrett Jackson auction that's live in Scottsdale. What are most of the people doing? If they're not bidding, what are they doing? They're looking at their phone. They're looking up to see what this car cost. Especially the guys that are buying to resell. You know, so they're looking up. Oh man, this car brought $35 million or whatever, and it's up there, and it's only $12 million. So if they're looking to buy and flip, man, I could see that guy making an impulse buy because, heck, 2 weeks ago this one brought this much money. I'm going to buy this one and flip it and make a bunch of money. I'd be willing to bet that that's already happened.
I would think that we're talking McLaren F1s and Ferrari Testarossas and 5 million up cars. That doesn't happen too much. We would hope that those are an educated buyer and somebody doesn't go in and look at Wikipedia and go, wait a second, this whatever world record price is $7.8 million, and this one's only going for $3 million. I'm going to buy it and bid it up, and then find out that the world record price is like 1.1. But I would really bet that when you get into what I used to call second mortgage cars, the $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 price range, that would really help, because I don't think those cars and necessarily those buyers, I mean, that's the bulk of the buyers
Exactly.
They put the cars out there. I want to say a week or 2 ago, Jay Leno was on an episode. He had an episode of his show, and he was in a Bradley GT, and he was kind of criticizing it on some of the Bradley GT Facebook pages and internet presence. They were saying, oh, that's the car that was at Barrett Jackson that bid to this, and then it was on Craigslist for this amount of money, and this and this, and the guy that originally had that car that appeared at Barrett Jackson, he knows what he sold it for. I know what he originally sold it for, and now it's whoever owns it now is trying to shop it for a lot more money, and they accuse Jay of being in that car. And the internet, in its nice quickness, Jeff Dunham, the comedian, actually owns the car Jay was in, and he put out a YouTube video about his Bradley GT collection this week, which really helped me and my love for Bradley GTs. It felt pretty good. Jeff Dunham, just as much of a car guy as Leno, but he discounted and said, this is the car, this is why I own it, but it is not the car that was at Barrett Jackson. He was squashing a lot of those internet rumors, because the car at Barrett Jackson was this brown metal flake with the same driving lights, blah, 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 blah. But there's a bunch of them out there with the same brown, with the same driving lights and the metal flake. That was the color of the car. Dunham lent his to Leno for Leno's piece, and then Dunham came back and corrected the internet fairly quickly. I don't know if he would have done that video if the bad information wasn't being thrown around immediately after that episode of Jay Leno's Garage. So I guess there is a little bit of a check and balance if the right person's watching.
Well, and yeah, that's the key, is that there is good information out there and there's bad information out there. And, that's, again, I think why, we just need to be careful with what we're doing when we're looking this stuff up, researching this stuff. And, I wasn't saying, just that someone goes on Wikipedia and adds some, fake number on that. But, you can create a fake website pretty easily that looks good, and you could have, a lot of misleading information on the values of cars on that maybe it doesn't make anyone believe that is solid truth, but it starts to at least muddy the waters. And again, it goes back to that, John, okay, I found it once. Can I find it 2 or 3 other times to prove that it's real? That is one of the big problems. Or I think that will be a big problem if too many people get involved with trying to be dishonest with the hobby.
We've covered pretty in depth the honesty and the dishonesty and verifying your information. And websites and that are good. I think I'm going to jump the conversation a little bit, and the advent of social media has really created an issue. And I'm assuming most of our listeners, the he's and she's, and that are listening to our podcast are a little bit car savvy and understand things. But there seems to be this thing, it was really big on Facebook over the winter, of certain procedures you do to your car, which if you do would destroy them. It's, antifreeze, and it creates something that your car can't, this won't create freezing. I'm not going to really go into any of the memes because I don't want to spread that misinformation. But as a joke that a car guy might have created, that you need to do this because of this season happening, or you need to do this because it'll extend the life of whatever. People have to even be careful. It's that people want to do things as a joke, and they're spreading incorrect information. Or everybody on the internet, because it's anonymous, is an expert on a topic. I've had conversations where, somebody's had something and there's been a question about it. They've created something, and this is what it is. This is my sighting. This is what happened. And a few people go, well, this really doesn't exist. This doesn't exist. Well, I might have access to the expert, and I reached out to the expert, and I come back and I say, I spoke with these experts. This is what they say. This is what it is. And you get a couple people, oh, that's good. That's good. But the person who originally posted because they were either wrong or slightly off, their information was wrong, come back and again defend themselves. The internet has created this world of experts when it was kind of nice when they didn't exist. Is anybody out there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to say there took a slight delay there because Will just texted the picture of blinker fluid.
Sorry. Yeah, that was what distracted everyone.
And
We'll put that up on our Instagram.
While I'm going to shorten that 35 or 45 second pause in editing, there's going to be a pause. That's why it happened. And that's exactly what we're talking about is I'm low on blinker fluid. And, if you buy 2 gallons of blinker fluid, I'll throw in a box of muffler bearings. So
yes,
that's exactly, and that's the joke. And I think I would say 90% of America would understand that joke. But there is a certain contingent, and I'm going to be mean and say New Yorkers that Uber everywhere that would think that might be something that they need to do when they move to Iowa because of a job transfer.
Great. Now the New Yorkers are going to be after us.
and 6 or 7 Iowans.
Oh, well, yeah.
Well, I'd like to change it a little bit to something that we at Big Oak Garage, or mainly me, benefit from the internet greatly is being able to buy parts from across the pond. I can get on the internet and I can research parts that are not available in the United States, whether it's a cool wing nut or an air cleaner that only came on something that was produced overseas that would look right at home in one of our custom builds that nobody's ever seen before, especially on an American car that we take to these hot rod shows. I can buy off of, eBay or, another website that sells vintage car parts or even modern car parts that's not available in the United States and have them shipped over here for, putting them on something custom and making our builds a little more unique, and people wondering, hey, where'd you get that engine cover for that LS motor? The one on the blue and white Ford truck is actually from Australia. It's a Holden engine cover. So everybody's nobody's seen one. Where'd it come from? Well, it come from Australia. Ordered some wing nuts for a project that we're building to hold the air cleaners on, just for the sheer fact of they're different. They're not available here, and you just have them shipped over here, and we benefit from that just about on every project that we build. There's something that comes over here from some other country. A little truck we're building right now, there were some specific little bolts that I wanted. Nobody had them, but a company in Australia had them, so I just ordered them and they shipped them here. We benefited from it every day. Just being able to find parts that you would never find them any other way other than searching it on the internet.
I think parts are probably the biggest impact the internet's had, because it's taught, or doesn't limit itself to cars. It covers antiques, it covers glassware, it covers baseball cards, everything. That things that we once thought were extremely rare or hard to find exist everywhere. It's just only two people would ever take them to a swap meet or put them in a issue of Name That Magazine's classifieds for sale. You never see them come up, or maybe at an estate auction. It's proven that some things are, like I said, not as rare as we once thought they were, and really tank the prices. And other things are extremely rare. Back, like I said, when I was doing eBay 10, 12 years ago, I had a Triumph Spitfire that I bought to use some of the parts for another project I had, and I started to sell parts of it on eBay, and I think it was an A-arm or uprights or something I listed, and there was nothing in the eBay history to even base a price on. And I'm somebody, when I sell parts that I don't need or sell things I don't need, I don't care what I'm going to get for them. I just want them to go to somebody who can use them, and I don't want them at my house anymore. So I put them up, and this thing sold for $117 or $128. I mean, just over $100. And then all of a sudden, 2 weeks late, but within the next 2 weeks, there were 5 or 6 of these things up there because somebody saw them sell for that, and everybody thought that's what they were worth. It was before the buy it now on eBay, which that's a whole nother topic. The internet's affected that. I remember going to swap meets, Chickasee swap meet, Carlisle events, and things like that, and the vendors 15 years ago hated eBay, hated what eBay had done, because it made some of the stuff that they had worthless. It made some of the stuff that it was a competitor to them. People weren't going to the swap meets. Now people go to the swap meets, more of an adventure, and maybe I'll find a part or go there. We covered it a few episodes ago. You go there to have a good time and talk to people, and maybe the part transaction, the money moving, is slowed down a little bit. I'll say that, I work with a car swap meet for a living, and I work with a motorcycle swap meet for a living. The motorcycle industry has been a lot different. Their swap meet, a lot of those guys want to go in the parts, and that's the only place you're going to find this stuff. It's interesting because now we're getting to a point, I don't think the car swap meets nor the automotive or the motorcycle swap meets, automotive or motorcycle, really care about eBay. They have their niche of things, and they know what they're going to sell. Things have leveled out. It's really changed the demographic of the purchaser and the clientele at swap meets, and it's helped dictate some of the prices. Some of the prices, like I said, have went up. Some of the prices have went down. It's kind of like the Will alluded to the Barrett-Jackson effect. The first year that I went and interned at Barrett-Jackson was like the first or second year they were on TV and didn't have a lot of impact. They were still on the ancient channel Speed Vision, and I'm not even sure who carries them now at MSNBC or Velocity or wherever they're at. The DVR just picks it up and I watch it. And now everybody thinks their car's worth X number of dollars because it sold at Barrett-Jackson, and don't take all the demographics and situation of the Barrett-Jackson into account. So not every Chevelle's worth $90,000, etc. That's some of the little things that I think the internet has done to both help and hurt the hobby. Is it made some of those rare things, hard to find things, easy to find, and it's made some of those what we thought were easy to find and everyday mundane things actually proved that they're fairly rare and should be worth some more money. And then there's the people that just, let's see what we can get for them. It's books on Amazon that you can buy for $5 or $500, and they're the same condition, just one person thinks it's rarer than the other.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the interesting twist on the internet, if you will, and this might get a little convoluted, I guess, but the internet, with everything that it's done, it has opened a door that essentially the consumer market is, again, go back, it's global. And so you have the opportunity to market your vehicle or your part to a much broader audience, which could increase the price you get for it because more people are interested in it and looking at it and might be willing to pay a little more to make sure nobody else gets the car that they want. But you also have the chance that you're selling a car or a part that you think is rare, and now that you have everybody in the world almost able to go on the internet and post things, you find out that 3,000 other people have that same part that you have up for sale, and they can't sell it because you're the only 3,000 people in the world that for some reason want it. Market wise, I think it's had a weird effect because it does open the door to so many more possible buyers, but it also opens the door to so many more possible competitors that have the same piece or part or automobile that you have. So one way it could drive the price up, the other it could drive the price down.
And I'm going to go to the good side of the internet. And like I said, I don't buy much on eBay and don't do anything or a lot with eBay. But I will say every time I buy a new car, which, as we've discussed, is a yearly occasion for me, like when I bought my Velociter last October, I think it was, one of the first things I did that week is, what can I do to kind of personalize it? Because I don't customize cars anymore that I drive daily, but I want some personalization, and it's nice to get on and go on eBay, and you can find everything that's potentially available to, say, modify in a bolt-on application for a new car. I mean, if I was Will, I might go ahead and do some body modifications and have my guys adjust some sheet metal and things. But if I want, what are some cool graphics and how can I change those up and have my graphics guy who does vinyl change that up and I can get a little bit more personalized, or can I actually do something with the mirrors, or what can I do to make this just a little bit different than everybody else? And the internet's, it's like getting the old J.C. Whitney catalog, but it's right there and you can go through it and, oh yeah, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And I think it helps a little bit of the creativity. There's ways to go a lot farther. I mean, if I had a 3D printer, there's a couple things I'd love to 3D print to help. And I have a buddy that wants to create a certain item for his Challenger with the 3D printer, and I think now I have access to the 3D printers and the graphics programs to maybe build that prototype for him and do a couple of those things without actually investing in the equipment. But it does let people know what's out there and what can be done in a really easy, simple way. And you don't have to wait for the car magazine. You don't have to wait for anything like that. And I guess saying car magazine, that's a different way that the internet has helped. I carry an iPad Pro 12.9 inch everywhere I go. And one of the big reasons I bought the 12.9 inch iPad wasn't because it did all this fancy stuff and it has a cool little pencil. It's because I can get my magazines digitally, appears on the screen the same size as a magazine page. It's just like thumbing through a magazine with most of the magazine apps. and I can get on an airplane and carry 50 different magazines with me in the space of an iPad. Again, that's another thing that the internet's made much more convenient for disseminating information. Granted, websites and stuff will do that, but I'm still, I'm that generation that still likes magazines, but the iPad has at least got me off necessarily getting a forest worth of magazines each month to getting them digitally.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because I've heard a few guys, and I haven't looked into this yet, but I've heard a couple guys I know talk about the fact that there's now websites that are basically offering prototyping and machining services where if you're talented enough to even give them a rough drawing and measurements of a part that you've come up with, they'll actually rapid prototype it or machine it for you and send it to you. I've just heard about this in the last couple weeks. I heard a couple guys mention something about it. I don't know if you guys have run into this, John, especially with you and the maker stuff you're getting into. I mean, that could open a whole door to some very interesting things, I think. John, have you heard anything about these?
No, when I was with the conservation firm I was at 12 years ago or so, and we were doing historical artifacts and that, there was a website, and I don't know if they exist. I'll put their name out there. It was emachine.com. You would go in, and they had their own online CAD program that on your PC you could design the part. You chose the metal, but you had to design the part, so you had to have some of the CAD talent to do it. But it was a very simple program. And so you designed the part, you chose the metal, all the dimensions were there. You sent it off to them. They came back with what that would cost you to have made, whether you bought 1, 2, or 100. And of course, it got cheaper the more you bought, because once you set the machine up, the first one's expensive. After that, it's material cost and time. And that service worked great for us. And I know there's many, many more that have, that was 12 years ago. And now with the advent of 3D printers, there are lots of sites. And if you go to a lot of even the 3D printer sites, there are files and files that you can just get online and basically download the file and print what you need. So what you've heard of, Derek, does exist. It's actually been out there at least, I would say, 15 plus years, and is a very handy service if you don't have a 5-axis, CNC machine in your garage. It's a way to have access to a 5-axis CNC machine and have a part produced. I work with a guy that's designing his own watches and building his own watches, and he's one of these, he wants to do everything, but I've worked with him for 10 years. He's been working on this watch for 12 years because he's tried to buy all of the tooling and everything. And the hopes are by Christmas, he'll have his first prototype done. Really cool item he's building. But if he would have listened to me 10 years ago and went to eMachine and just uploaded his SolidWorks drawings to them, he would have had everything machined and he could have had this thing put together and, maybe been selling a few watches by now. But it's, what you want to do. But yes, those services are out there, and I think will become more and more prevalent as time goes on, and really the costs of the equipment come down. And Fusion's 360 is a fairly simple software program to use. It's free for the individual to use, provided you're not selling or monetizing anything you create in it. If you design, say, a fork in it and you print out 8 of them and you use them in your kitchen, they don't care. If you printed out 8,000 of them and tried to sell them, then Autodesk is going to come after you and want you to pay for the Fusion. So
I just want to point out that that's how up with the times I am. It's been, these services have been around 15 years and I'm just now hearing about them. It's either that or it's just, I have a lot of friends that have lathes and Bridgeports and all those type of machines that, I've just been around machining your own parts all my life.
I came from a place that we didn't have that facility. We didn't have a machinist on staff. Now I'm at a place that we usually, any day of the week, have 3 Haas CNC machines, lathes, tool mills, Bridgeports, every Sun and engine tooling. So yes, when you surround yourself with them, but for that person who needs that one-off part, unless Will's totally revamped his shop in the last year or so, he doesn't have a Haas machine in his his repertoire of tools. I know he'd love to have one, but, this would be even something that he could do, provided, he couldn't drive down the street to another shop and have it made. But when you're in the industry, you have those ins and outs. When you're not, sometimes this is what you've got to do.
Yeah, one of the problems with that on our side is the timeline of it. It can take months to get the part developed and get it in your hands. I've entertained the thought of, doing the internet-based, machining companies, but I find it a lot better if I just kind of whip something up, take it to my buddy's shop down the road and knock it out pretty quick. I'm sure one day I'll probably get him so busy where I may try that just to kind of see what the turnaround time on something like that is. Now, especially that I have a guy working for me that's pretty good on AutoCAD, so that might make it a lot easier to do that. One thing I want to go back and touch on that you mentioned a little bit, John, was the magazine side of things. I have a lot of friends in the in the hot rod industry that have lost jobs because of the internet and killing the magazine industry. A lot of people are not going to keep up with the times and get an iPad or something to get the digital copy, and they lose sales I guess they lose sales because people are getting the internet copy, and so that ultimately they're not making as much money. And a lot of magazines companies have went under. I know that 10, which used to be Peterson Publications, they're down to half the magazines they were 10 years ago. I know of 8 or 10 guys just in the last couple of years that, and I'm not talking about guys that just went to the car shows and took pictures. I'm talking guys higher up in these companies that have lost their jobs because I guess it's a lot easier to produce a online copy versus a paper copy. And they just keep combining magazines, just like they done away with Custom Rodder and put it under Street Rodder. And they done away with Classic Truck and put it in with Custom Classic Trucks. The magazines didn't get any bigger, so the content is less, and that ultimately makes it a lot harder to get one of your cars, one of your builds featured in a magazine. To me, which is still really, really cool to have your car featured in a magazine. To me, there's nothing better than opening up your mailbox and there being a magazine that a car that you built with your own hands is featured in that book. So that's one of the negative things about it, because you can't take an online copy of a magazine or a digital copy of a magazine and hang it on your wall. So you lose a lot of that, and I don't know. There's just something about flipping through a Street Rodder magazine and just filling the pages, and that I really enjoy.
I totally understand, what you're saying, and it's kind of, I think some of it is the digital. I don't believe, and if you're out there and you produce magazines and write magazines, I don't believe producing a digital copy of a magazine is any less intense than producing the print copy. It does save, obviously, on postage and printing costs. So I see print shops losing money. Obviously, the post office has their own issues. I've never had a car featured in a magazine. I think I've got a car pictured in the back of a magazine once, in Reader's Rides or whatever. To me, especially when I was younger and I wasn't so in the industry, there's nothing cooler than seeing a buddy's car or a friend's car in a magazine. You go buy 10 or 15 issues to hand it out and say, hey, I know this guy. There's that fun level. I still love when I see my stuff in print. I write articles for a couple different newsletters every month. That's still, especially to my grandparents, that's cool to them. They don't care if I make a website or have a post on a website. They don't care if I have a podcast. But if I can send them a magazine of something that I've written in, that's something that to me makes them feel good, and I get a little bit, I get a lot of reward. So I know exactly what you're saying, Will. And I've seen the destruction of the magazine. One of my lines of cars is Kit Cars. And in my life, I've seen Kit Car Magazine go away. I've seen Kit Car Illustrated go away. And that merged into another magazine, and that went away. And now there's a new magazine called Reincarnation, which is a really nice replica magazine. They're really trying to change the thinking behind Kit Cars, but they are as much digital as they are print. And their print subscription at this last I knew is free. You register and they will mail you the hard copy because they know very few people want the hard copy. They want the digital magazine. Just subscribe to Make Magazine, and of course they give you a massive discount if I get it all digital and I don't get it in print. So they want it that way. That's one area that this whole media has changed is digital content of magazines, producing a website where it's a blog or something and all of your articles come out that way. Talking to a magazine writer with used to be a major car magazine and not so much anymore, about doing certain things, and a lot of it is, we got to do it digital, and they really don't care about the in-magazine article. They're concerned about Facebook Live and YouTube Live and being able to stream this and get the content out immediately because nobody wants to hear about it 2 weeks later. They want to hear about it now so they can participate with whatever their online comments and such are.
Yeah,
and that's
I guess we can blame a lot of it on social media because we go to these hot rod shows and we're posting pictures of, just say the Detroit Autorama, okay? You got, the Grade 8. Nobody has seen a picture of these cars. They're debuted there. Well, heck, by the end of Friday afternoon, everybody in the country's seen 400 pictures of the Grade 8. So why buy a magazine with it on the cover in a 10-page article, or a 5-page article?
3 months after the fact, by then it's old news, and heck, there's another it car this week.
Exactly, SEMA. Why are we going to go buy a magazine after SEMA? That we've already seen every car that we wanted to see featured there. So yeah, I guess ultimately that's probably what has definitely killed the magazine market is social media.
Well, the magazines have killed it. I'll say podcasting probably hasn't helped it. Podcasting isn't really mainstream. YouTube is right there. I mean,
yeah.
Well, yeah, I went to, I go to a show, and before I get home, there's 15 YouTube videos about something, and now I get to see it run, I get to hear it, and I can digest this information while I'm doing something else. That's one reason I like audio podcasts better than a video podcast. That's why we do audio, is I can listen to this podcast while I'm in the shop working or such. But if I'm watching it on YouTube, I can't. But if I want to see something run, and that's why, we have our complimentary Facebook and our Instagram pages, is I'm able to put pictures out right away of the things we talk about and help educate you and make it easier for you as a listener to get this information. And it's touched on everything. We could probably talk 5 hours about each little, and talk about the nuance of the eBay and the parts buying. We didn't even talk about selling of cars. We're into the magazines, and, Hemmings just shut down one of the magazines that I really enjoyed. I mean, first I enjoyed British Car, which was merged and became part of, I believe, Hemmings Sports and Exotic. And Hemmings Sports and Exotic now went away, and they replaced your subscription with Classic Car. And to be honest, I don't want Classic Car, otherwise I would have, subscribed to it to begin with. And the Hemmings magazine itself, the Gold Book, used to be probably 25% larger. It was all newsprint, and it was all cars for sale. Now, like I said, it's reduced in size 25%, and half of it is a print color magazine with magazine articles, and half the cars are for sale because by the time I put a print ad in Hemmings, I hope to have the car sold in this day of eBay. I decide to sell my car, I pop it on eBay, I pop it on Auto Trader, name your, Bring a Trailer, Barn Finds, you name your website. I can have it sold. I can have it listed, sold, paid for, gone, out of my garage, and be driving something new before that Hemmings issue would have ever even hit the newsstand. And I think a lot of us car people, one of the reasons we want to sell our cars, there's another one for sale that day that I want to buy, and I need my 50 grand that day, or 20 grand, or 2,500, or whatever. I don't have time to wait for the publication. That a magazine used to be 3 months. I think they can turn them in 2 months now, but it's still, print media is suffering because of the internet. It's creating a whole new industry. And you talked about 10 magazines, and I believe the whole corporation was just bought by Discovery Communications. I've got it here in my notes, and that included Velocity Television and all of that, all fall under the Discovery umbrella, because they're looking to make a lot more video content, internet content, and again, slide away from that print magazine. It's going to be a challenge for those companies because they, you have a boardroom with older people that don't understand the new stuff, and you have the people like, I'm going to say Scotty DTV, who they pop stuff out daily, and it's new, it's fresh, and he understands his clientele. He's out there with them, and he doesn't have to report to anybody. And that's part of I think the good of the internet is it's out there and lively and very in tune with the consumer.
Yeah, I think that's key that, you just said it's in tune with the consumer, because going back to that talk about Hemmings, or any of the magazines that are published with advertisements, classifieds, there are so many websites and even a lot of the major, international or national clubs. Most of them have a classifieds webpage, and you're getting direct marketing to the direct collectors of that type of car. The HCCA, the Horseless Carriage Club of America. You go on their website, there's a cars for sale section, and you know that if you're looking for a horseless carriage or a classic era car, you can go on there and find a whole lot of them for sale, and you don't have to go flipping through Hemmings when it shows up, looking at each make of car from that era and trying to figure out what's for sale. It's right in front of you. The same thing, I'm sure, with, the Mustang clubs that are out there, the Camaro clubs that are out there, all the different clubs that are out there. You go to their website, almost every one I know of, there's a classifieds or car for sale section. You're targeting your key audience, who are the guys that as soon as that car goes up one day, tomorrow morning I list one of my cars, by that evening it's probably going to be sold because I'm key marketing it to the right people. Whereas Hemmings or any of those publications that are in print, you're just broadcasting that out a wide net and hoping someone that's looking sees it.
Another example of that, touching back on print magazines and YouTube videos, is Scotty was at the Detroit Autorama when we debuted our 65 Dart project. Well, I think Friday night, maybe Saturday night, it went up. Well, 6 months later, it's in Hot Rod Magazine. So everybody had already seen it 10, 15, 20 times and heard, a video of me talking about the car and Scotty walking around it and hearing it run. And he even got an interview with the owner, Willie, during that. And to me, that's a 10-minute video of walking around with the guy that built it, talking to the owner, hearing it run, seeing it move, versus just flipping pages and reading.
And using the old cliche and thinking 24 frames a second for video, if he's got 10 minutes of video at 24 pictures per second and 1,000 words per picture, plus the owner talking, you get so much more information in your 10 minutes there than you do 10 minutes of reading that article in Hot Rod Magazine or whichever publication you're at. And the only thing you lose is, like you said, that ability to hang the magazine on your wall and have it laying out in your waiting room to, show people.
Which I don't want people to think that I'm complaining about that, because I set out 3 goals when we built the Dart, and I knew Scotty was going to shoot it, so that wasn't an issue. But it was to make a grade 8 for Robert McGaffin to shoot it for Hot Rod Magazine. And so, I'm ecstatic that it made it in Hot Rod Magazine. But for, a subscriber, why is he going to subscribe to something when it's already out there?
Well, have we talked the internet to, I guess, the death?
Well, the only thing that we hadn't touched on that I kind of wanted to was forums. We can talk about that later because we'll get into a whole nother version of this, just with the information that's out there on forums, from routine maintenance to your daily driver to building a hot rod. So
I would say let's go ahead and jump into the forums, because the two-parters don't seem to do too well for us. So if we end up with an hour and 30 show,
all right,
and let's see how that the listeners react to that. Maybe they just want more of us each week as opposed to little bits of us.
Well, I know there's a lot of hot rod forums out there that we don't participate in as much as we used to, but we still participate in a good bit. And it's really geared more towards, I would say, the guy at home building a high-end car. But I mean, we post our build pictures on some forums as well, and it helps with everything. It helps with building a little bit of hype or momentum, so to speak, with your project. That helps Hot Rod Magazine see it. Maybe they want to do a photo shoot with you when you debut the car. Gain sponsorship if you're looking for somebody to sponsor you a set of wheels or tires or paint. So that that really helps get your project out there before it's finished. Create a little bit of buzz, so to speak. And that's just one of the small things that we use forums for. I know that some of the guys that work for me, trying to find something that's wrong with their daily driver. It's not running correctly, or, something about changing the blend door motor in your Tahoe or whatever. You can hop on a Tahoe forum, search it, and boom, there it is. Step-by-step pictures, videos of how to just do regular maintenance to your daily driver. Ultimately, that's, going to hurt some of the quick oil change places or mechanic shops or anything like that. But, it sure does help save money to the normal consumer that don't mind getting his hands dirty a little bit, or enjoys wrenching on his car in his driveway, or, whatever.
I don't think it hurts the quick oil change places or the little service centers, because the history of the automobile has always been people wrenching on their vehicles and wanting to, and there's legislation about it, and there's ways that the government's ensuring that we still can wrench on our vehicles. And that demographic keeps getting smaller and smaller, and the shops still get more and more business, and that's kind of reflected in that you can take your car into some shops and it can take 2 or 3 days. I used to drop off one of our cars at the dealership, schedule an oil change. I'd be lucky to get it back in 3 days because they were so busy. Now, I think if I would have actually driven it in and not scheduled, I would have got it back quicker. But, I had the courtesy to make an appointment. I had to wait a little bit longer. But it's not uncommon to drop off a car and have to pick it up a week later to have, service done. Not an oil change or tire rotation. But if something's broken on it, or I had an ignition issue with one of my other vehicles, and I dropped it off and I couldn't get it back for a week, and they basically told me, we couldn't find a problem. It takes a week for them to tell me, sorry, we couldn't find a problem. So I don't think there's problems with that. The forums are great for, disseminating information, helping self-diagnose the cars. I would say, I've done some part-time work in commercial shops for, just general repair, kind of for fun and to hang out and things like that. But the shop owners hate it when you come in and you say, this is what's wrong with my car. Or you go to AutoZone and you do the check, get a code and you come back. you fix the code, but usually that code's created because something else farther down the line caused that part to break. And it hurts people a little bit with the forums and the diagnostics, but it's also, we'll take the Lotus Elise, always has air conditioning problems, and I know that. And you get on the forums and you can find out from other owners how they've managed to maybe make their air conditioning work a little bit better, or continue with this, or with the advent of the direct injection engines a couple of years ago, there was a lot of talk about catch cans and the oil and the way the valves don't get properly cleaned because there's not fuel washing over the valves anymore. It's being directly injected in the cylinder and you get buildup on the valves. It helps people know how to repair that. I know on the Mini forums, I see owning a Mini. It makes me a little paranoid of owning the Mini at certain mileage areas and the service about them and the things that can go wrong. But it's nice to know that community's out there and you can go out and 20 other people have had this problem and they can tell you, well, no, you really got to go to the dealer to do that, or this is what you have to do here. Back when I had my Porsche, I did a lot of the maintenance myself because frankly, I probably couldn't afford a Porsche when I had it, let alone the maintenance. And it helped me have that car for a little bit longer than I needed to have it because that information's out there. It also helped me buy it. It also made me aware of issues to look for when buying it. It goes back a little bit to where we started. There's good information out and there's bad information out there, and you just have to research or believe the person you're talking to and definitely go with your gut.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, John. And that was going to be, one of the things I mentioned was, again, it goes back to that when you're on the internet, when you're on these forums, especially, you got to take, I think, everything with a grain of salt if you go with the old, phrasing. But you just got to be wise when you're reading it. I'm no stranger to forums. I've been on forums, anything from hot rodding, some hot rodding forums that I was involved with when I was, a little younger back in college and, was just into all the different car stuff, but also just like Will said, some of the guys in his shop, you get a problem with your daily vehicle. Any one of the three of us probably could say, well, it's acting like this, so it's gotta be something with this part of the vehicle. It just from the line of work we're in and the things we do. But when you can go on the forum and, I used to own a Dodge Durango, check engine light comes on, have an idea what it might be by the way the vehicle's acting, rather than run in the first thing and get the dealership to read a code on it. I get to work or get home from work and the dealership's already closed. Well, hop online, see if there's a Dodge Durango forum and go on there and see if other people are having the same problem. Turns out, yeah, they were. And this is what it was. Called the dealership up, took it in, and they essentially told me the same thing. And I'm not saying that I walked in there and said, hey, this is what's wrong with my truck, but I at least had an idea of what others people's Durangos were doing. Recently the forum was also helped me to find a technical service bulletin on my F-150 that I have. I was having an issue. I thought, wow, this seems really weird that I'm having this issue with this truck. Went on, started doing some research, found through a forum, and it was able to find through that forum that there was a service bulletin out, and I was able to kind of figure out what the problem was and what I would need to do. Like you say, these forums are positive in so many ways in helping people, track down information, figure out that other people out there are having the same problem with the same vehicle that you own. And, it's just that matter of really, it informs you a little bit, but if you're, maybe not a car guy or a car person, like one of the three of us, like I say, we can kind of judge what's going on, read through it, get some background information, but definitely find a professional that can also back that up, make sure that really is what's going on with the vehicle.
Yeah, with modern cars nowadays, everything affects everything. Filling something out and thinking you know what it is, like we did back in 15, 20 years ago with just a carbureted car or whatever. It's not that way anymore. If you don't have a computer to diagnose it or or something else, or somebody's had the same exact problem, then it could be a hard row to hoe, you know?
So I'm thinking our determination on the forums, especially for diagnostic purposes, good if you vet the information fairly well.
Oh, I think so. Yeah. I mean, I really do, because, like I've said, I've used them a couple times just to go on and see, because you don't know. I mean, I have a problem with my truck and I notice something. Well, rather than just go in blindly to the dealership or, a shop somewhere, hey, plug it in and read the code for me and tell me what's wrong, can at least go online and get some of that. Well, this is what's happening with a lot of other F-150s. And it gives me, when they come back to me and say, well, this is what we found, I can go, oh, wow, yeah, that's what's happening with everybody else's. It's common, and it probably needs to be fixed. I mean, I think they're useful. I mean, I've been on some forums that I mentioned, some of the hot rod forums that I was on years ago, that I saw some really bad information on how to modify a chassis or do something that is a little riskier for the at-home restorer or hot rodder that hasn't had a lot of experience with building cars. So in that type of forum, I think there's a chance for a little more risky information. And Will, maybe you can talk to that, because, especially with the hot rod industry being your field, you might have seen more of that.
Yeah, some of the biggest things is, misled information on, say, LS swap. It's one of the things that I'm a stickler on is I'm not a big fan of a fuel pump on the fuel rail. I think they all need to be in the tank, like a factory car, and, they run cooler, they last longer, better performance, don't heat your fuel up. Just a lot of little things like that people, a lot of people on the internet say is okay, or on forums to say is okay. And it'll work, don't get me wrong. But eventually it's not a matter of if it's going to fail, it's when it's going to fail. So, just a few little things like that are out there that I wouldn't call it bad, but something that I disagree upon. I like doing things once and not doing it again, but people have good luck out of doing it that way, but I'm just not one of them. And that's just one of the things that I'm familiar with. And, your harnesses, modifying a stock harness versus buying a completely made harness. Just, a few little things like that people swear by that I'm not real keen on.
Well, let me touch on one other aspect of internet and how it's affected the car hobby before we run out of here, since we've got you a little bit. What is our overall look? Because we're all of the age that we've been in car clubs, that they existed and they got together and we had our meets once a month and we'd hang out with each other in person and chat and look at what street rod was modified this way and what hot rods this way and who bought the latest Model T, and you go hang out with your lowriders and such, or you go to your car stereo events. And that's all been replaced by Facebook groups. I'm on Facebook and there's 4 mini clubs locally, and there's 3 Mopar clubs and such. And these are where the clubs operate, and then I'm in a British car club that doesn't really, it's an older demographic, so nobody wants to be on Facebook. So they still do the meet once a month and that. Do we think that the internet is really taken, even the need for this personal interaction? I can go join, say, a Ferrari club and pretend I own a Ferrari and be involved with the club online and not actually have the car. Is the internet been detrimental to this camaraderie that the car used to bring to us? Think back to the 50s, you go to the soda stands and we still have our cruise-ins and that, but is it really a younger demographic, or is it just a lot of us old geezers that go to the show and our parents that go to these shows, and the car club culture is kind of went away?
I don't think so. You go to local cruise nights and car shows, and no, there's not a ton of younger people there. But when I was growing up, going to stuff with my dad, there wasn't a lot of younger people involved either. I think it's, a lot of people develop their car hobby interest at a little older age, maybe than some of us or than most of us. That's just a thought.
The income arrives, and those those of you that were responsible. I wasn't necessarily, like I said, my car habit might be cheaper than if I had a cocaine habit. I'm not sure though. That you wait until you can afford that third car and maybe go out and do that. And I do remember when I was a kid and I was playing with car stereos, or I was playing with the CRXs or the mini trucks. It was a lot of kids and, a lot of people my age, 18, 19, 20, and we would hang out and we would get together and do things together. And now it seems it's a struggle. Oh, we're going to have a cruise in, we're going to have this, and you've got to plan it 2 months out, and hopefully everybody will arrive and nobody will commit until 2 days before, and it's really hard and difficult to plan.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it might be bad of me to say, or maybe it I'm not sure what it means, but I'm just not one anymore, and maybe it's because I'm getting into a different stage in my life. I don't know. But I'm not one for really going to the car cruises or the car shows anymore and just parking and sitting. I enjoy getting in my car and driving it, and just driving and enjoying the experience of the car, actually using it and being in it. And so that has kind of steered me away from going to the shows and going to the local, cruise night and just kind of sitting around chatting with everybody, which, don't get me wrong, it's fun. You meet people that way. I probably will need to do some of that again here pretty soon, because I've moved to a new area and I don't know a lot of people. Fortunately, some people on my street are car people and I've met them. I still see a strong, like Will said, I still see a strong showing of some of these cruise nights. And really one of the big ones that's going on is this whole move of, cars and coffee around the nation. I'm seeing those are becoming very popular in the areas they're being held. I don't really know if the internet has taken away from the cruise-ins, the car shows, the cruise nights, things like that, or if maybe some of them are just suffering, as seems most people are living more hectic and busy lives nowadays than they were maybe in the 50s, 60s, 70s era, and maybe we just don't have that time sometimes dedicated to going and hanging out at the local cruise night.
Yeah, with cars and coffees, like in my situation, heck, man, I can get up, I can go, I can hang out with my buddies, and I can be back home before my wife gets out of bed. So we can still do stuff around the house, and it's not, hey babe, I'm going out for the night, see you later, to a cruise night. It's, heck, I'm back before she gets out of bed. So, that's a win-win for me.
I like sleeping in on Saturdays, so I'll be honest, I haven't been to our Cars and Coffee in probably a year, but I usually make it to Exotic Car Lunch on Saturday, 11:30 I roll in. So
oh Lord.
Saturday's the only day I get to sleep in each week, if that.
So if you want John at an event, make sure it's lunch or dinner, no breakfast, no brunch, just lunch or dinner. Okay, that is the key.
You better supply the lunch too.
Well, of course.
No, I usually get lucky, and thank you for the members of the club that do listen to me. Somebody picks up my lunch every now and then. I guess that probably means I should start doing it now that I think about it.
They have you a fine cigar after that too for you?
No, I find some of my car friends are cigar people, but not a lot of them. And you really worry about, walking up to somebody's Ferrari, smoking a cigar and the top's off. And, you got to be careful with your cigars around cars. You accidentally have a puff of smoke drift by somebody's Nissan, and they go nuts because, oh no, now it's going to smell like cigars the rest of its life.
No, they think something's wrong with it. Like, my car's smoking.
I said Nissans, not rotary powered Mazdas. Sorry, Philip.
Well, see, that's why you need to smoke cigars at antique car events, because it's just, I mean, the smoke would just blend in with everything else. So,
That's right.
hey.
An ash on a white tire, that would never come out. So let's go ahead. We're on the timer here before editing at 1:30, and I'm sure everybody's driven to work, driven home, and probably driven back to work by now. Does anybody we're going to kind of do some recommendations each week, or something that maybe hit the news that we found interesting that we might want to draw your attention to, or, podcasts, whether or not there's something we're using in our shops or things like that. Does anybody have this week to touch on, or?
The only thing I want to add is, I know I touched on it a little bit at the very beginning, was the Tri-5 Nationals in Bowling Green. Man, you need to put that on your list. I know we talked about car shows that we really enjoyed a few episodes ago, and if I would have been to this show before we recorded that episode, I would have talked a good bit about that show. You don't have to be a Tri-5 guy to attend it to really enjoy it. I mean, there's just so much going on, so much packed into a 2-day event. It's just a really awesome show at an awesome place too. Beach Bend Drag Strip has been around for a very long time. I think there's only 2 or 3 covered grandstands, drag strips left in the United States, and it's one of them. So yeah, put that on your definitely bucket list or to-do list, and try to attend it, because it'd be worth your while to do.
Yeah, and I mean, while we're on the topic of shows, I think I'll just throw out there again. I know I've mentioned it in the past, but it's only a couple weeks away now by the time this airs, and that is, if anybody that listens, any of our listeners, and I know some of my friends are some of our good listeners that are out there, but Old Car Festival is coming up in September, second weekend in September, so after Labor Day. I believe that's, the 9th and 10th this year. Old Car Festival up at Greenfield Village in Dearborn, Michigan. That's the antique car show that I go to every year. I actually narrate part of the pass and review experience, so if anybody is up in Michigan listening and in that Detroit, Dearborn area, that's a phenomenal show to come to if you're a early car guy or girl or anybody, early car kid. Hey, come on out.
I'm really not going to plug anything other than our social media, and we're going to begin a kind of a social media campaign. We'd love to get some more Instagram followers and some more Facebook friends or likes. We do a lot of posting, like I said, of the photographs and stuff that come out during the show and the things we talk about. When we did the fantasy episode of how much money do we spend, that whole week is filled with photographs of the cars that we talked about, because we talked about some obscure things or things that this is more what we were thinking when we were talking. We have a couple humorous things that pop up. Some of Will's projects pop up there, little bitty videos and things. So what I'm going to do is, one of my hobbies during the week, doesn't relate to cars, is turning. And I've got one of the companies I use has created a pen they call their 6-speed pen. Now, it's really a 5-speed pen with reverse, but if you count reverse as a speed, it's a 6-speed. And we'll put a picture of that up. But once we receive 250 total Facebook, Instagram followers, whether it's 125 or whatever, but when we have 100 or 250 friends and followers, we're going to give one of these pens away. I sell them on the street for about $85. It's kind of a cool little pen, and just a way to encourage you to go ahead and if you leave us an iTunes review, if you like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. Once we hit that 250, put all the names in a hat, and we'll draw a name, and somebody will be awarded that pen and a sticker for the podcast, and we'll see if you enjoy that. Like I said, it's just a way to help stay in touch with the show. So if you need to contact us, if you have ideas for shows, if you want us to hear us talk, you can reach us through those social media channels. No Driving Gloves on Facebook, No Driving Gloves on Instagram. We do have a Twitter feed, but I'm still not good at Twitter, so we don't do a lot of communication there, but we'll even include that in the count if you follow us on Twitter. or you can go ahead and send your show topics and suggestions to our email at nodrivinggloves@gmail.com. Check out the website at nodrivinggloves.com, and we'll talk to you guys in another week.